Hello, folks. Today we have an exciting topic to cover. It's going to be a memorable occasion in your life, I'm sure. In fact, it's probably going to be a big event. Well, maybe. The topic is events. This is how we listen for and respond to events, is what we'll be discussing here. So we're going to have just some new syntax to cover. Otherwise, we're just working on more from the jQuery library. So let's take a look. Events are signals released by elements in a document when they change in some way. For example, elements load, triggering the DOM to be updated. When all elements are loaded, the document issues a ready event. Sound familiar? That's right, that's the document ready event we've been dealing with all this time. So just the simple fact that elements are loaded into the page results in an event being triggered. Elements are able to be affected by the user. A whole host of specific events indicate user interactions, such as click, focus, blur, change, and many others. So every time you interact with the page, whether you're scrolling, whether you click on an item, whether you change the value in a form field, all these things are triggering events that we can listen for and respond to. In order to do that, we need to talk about something called event binding. This is where we set up event listeners and connect them to functions that respond to or handle the event. So we're going to have a listener that is going to call a handler. So those two terms are very important. The listener we attach to an item, an element in the document, and give it a specific event to listen for on that element. Then we connect it to a function that will be called as a result. So hopefully you can see those three pieces here in the event listener formula on the left. First is a normal jQuery selector where we pass in the object we want to select. Then we call .on, and in the first parameter of the on method, we name the event that we want to listen for, and it needs to be passed in as a string. And then in the third placeholder, we're going to name a separate function that acts as the event handler. So that means that you're going to have created or defined such a function. So over here on the right, I'm giving you the formula for defining an event handler function. Of course, you're going to name it like you would any function that you want to be able to call directly. And the convention is that we pass in one parameter that represents the event that triggered this function being called. So that would be essentially the event that we listened for in placeholder 2 over on the left side there, right inside the on method. So that event is usually represented simply by the variable e. There's nothing magical about that particular variable. You can make it whatever you'd like. But the convention you'll see in this course and elsewhere on the web is that the variable e is used to represent the event that was triggered. And then of course in placeholder 2 back on the right hand side here, we're going to provide some code that's going to be processed when the function is called. So this allows us to have one function that perhaps is called many times by different event listeners by kind of separating them like this. It also helps you see better that a listener and a handler are really two different things, but they are also connected. A listener will call a handler. A handler is set up so that it can be called by a listener. Right? But it's not required for us to do them separately. Anonymous functions can be used to provide an all-in-one solution. So we've also seen this pattern before in the course. Now we're officially introducing it. So in this case, hopefully you can see that this is really just the left side of the previous slide. All the same placeholders are here. It's just that in placeholder 3, we're actually inserting an anonymous function that is acknowledging e as a parameter coming in, and so 3 is now the code that we would have entered in the handler over on the right hand side of the slide. We're just now putting that into an all-in-one solution. So we select the event, we define which event we want, or sorry, we select the element, we define which event we want to be listening for, and then in placeholder number 3, we provide the code that should be called, or that should actually, be processed as a result of this. So tuck away the event handler and event listener ideas, and particularly the all-in-one. We'll be using that a lot in the course. But there's a few more things we need to understand about how events work that are discussed in the book, and I'll explain those a little bit more next here. We need to talk about event flow. So keep in mind that when you interact with an element on the page, you are interacting with a very specific element on the page. For example, look at this code here. If you can imagine what's going on, there's perhaps a series of list items that each contain a hyperlink wrapped around an image, a heading, and a description. So because that hyperlink is wrapped around 3 different elements, keep in mind that when I click on that hyperlink, while the result is going to be that I'm going to be taken to, that product or something like that, navigate to a different page, what I technically click on is not the hyperlink. What I technically click on will probably be one of those 3 elements inside the hyperlink. So it's important to note that the actual element that triggers the event is sometimes different from what we're actually listening for the event on. So in this case, we might listen for a click on the hyperlink here, but it might not actually be the hyperlink that was originally clicked on in a very technical fashion. So there's a difference, therefore, between the target element and sort of the current target. So what does that mean? Well, let's talk about event flow. First, there is the capturing phase, where when you click on an item, the document, starting at the outer level, searches down and identifies the very element that was actually clicked on through the DOM tree. So it builds this inheritance chain, or parent-child chain, all the way down to the thing that you clicked on. In this case, we're imagining that the H3 is actually technically what you clicked on. Then there's the bubbling phase, where we now move back out that tree and check to see if there are listeners at each of those successive parent levels. This is what allows us to click on the H3, but let that still lead to being hyperlinked somewhere else. The H3 didn't provide the hyperlink information, the A tag did. And there are default listeners attached to hyperlinks that tell your browser when a user clicks on a hyperlink, navigate to the page that is specified. All right, so delegation is a topic that comes up in that it is possible for us to listen for events at some element higher in the tree than the particular target that might actually have triggered the event. This allows us to improve performance. If you can imagine, if we attached an event listener to every single object inside of that A tag so that we could hopefully make sure to catch any click on any one of those things, that's rather inefficient. It's much better for us to listen out a layer from each of those things on the A tag itself. So we're technically delegating the event there when we listen for the click on the A tag. Even more, we could listen all the way out at body, and in our handler determine where the event took place and respond to it accordingly. So that's something we'll come back to a little bit later on the course when we know more about how to use conditional statements and other structures like that. But it's a good opportunity to introduce this idea of event flow. And delegation will be something that comes up. So also related to these things, we mentioned earlier that it is possible to have something called the target and something called the current target. So the event.target, remember E represents the event that was actually triggered. So that is an object that contains data. It contains actual properties and methods. One of those is target. That represents the element that actually issued the event. And E.currentTarget is the element that is actually currently responding to the event. So that's the element that we actually put the listener on. So in the situation above here, if we put the listener on the A tag, but we actually clicked on the H3. The H3 is what would be returned by e.target, and the A tag is what would be returned by e.currentTarget. Okay? All right, so along these lines, there are a few things that we often work with when it comes to events. The first one is just a standard property of an event itself. So you can call e.preventDefault to stop the default action from taking place. So in the case of a hyperlink, if you want to use the hyperlink as a hook to cause some action, it's likely that you should directly inside of your handler call e.preventDefault so that your browser doesn't try to navigate away from the page, since that's kind of the default behavior of hyperlinks. Okay, so that one is just a normal native property of the event object. The next two demonstrate how, when we're working with events in jQuery, very likely we're going to want to convert the target or current target objects to jQuery objects. So this is where we've done things like this before, in that we're following the convention of using a $sign as we name our variables. But then notice that on the right side of the assignment operator, we have a jQuery selector wrapping around the e.target and e.currentTarget that we looked at on the previous slide. Of course, I've got to click through those there. So those two properties are just native properties of the event object, but they return DOM elements. And so if we want to work with those DOM elements as jQuery objects, we have to convert them to jQuery objects, like this. Now, of course, there's nothing magical about the variable names, target and currentTarget. The event properties, e.target and e.currentTarget, those need to be spelled exactly as you see them. But the variable names on the left side of the assignment operators, you could name those whatever you'd like to name them. And it would make sense to name them something that's relevant to the handler that you're dealing with. So if you listen for a click on a button, it would be logical to say var $button is assigned $e.target, something like that. All right, so here is just a little example, and then we'll switch over to the demo and do a little bit more there. Take a look at the structure here. Notice that when we listen for a click on something with a class of modal link, we have an all-in-one handler built in right here. So can you find the thing with a class of modal link? It's the A tag, right? So what we want to do is, as a result of clicking on that link, we actually want to open a modal window. So we're imagining that we've got some CSS set up such that when we add the on class to the modal object, that's the thing with a class of modal, that maybe turns the modal on and makes it appear. Maybe it's hidden by default or something like that. So you can see the idea here. All right, let's take a look at some examples. All right, so our starting file here is going to look similar to exercise files that we've had in the past. It's got this shopping list, over here on the right. And we're going to do some practice first, and then we'll add some functionality to that shopping list. So first of all, let's just practice with event listeners. And by the way, if you open this demo file and you have some code in here in the DRE, just pull it out. I think I cleared it, but if that happens, just pull it out and then carry forward. Okay, so first we're going to listen for a click event on the thing with an ID of intro. So we want to select the thing with an ID of intro. Of course, that needs to go in quotes. And we're going to listen for a click. I like to fill in my structure like that, going in and kind of filling out the structure first and then going in and putting in the different placeholders. Okay, so it says up here in the instructions that we want to just log a message in response. So I'm just going to say console.log clicked on intro. All right, let's take a look. So where is intro? It's probably over here. Nope. I think this should be info, not intro. So sorry for the typo there, but click on info. So info. All right, we're going to get to see delegation firsthand here. So I'm going to click over here, and no matter where I click, as long as I'm in that div, I get this event. Okay, so I've clicked outside. I do not see that number increase, but if I click back inside, I see the number of times this has been called increase. So let's just show off the idea of delegation here really quickly. Let's also console.log the e.target and e.current target. All right, so let's see what the difference is there. So again, we're listening on the ID intro, but if I click right here, I clicked on the paragraph that has a class of lead. So that's the first thing. That's the target. That's the actual thing that triggered the click event. Then the second thing, the current target, is the thing that listened for that event. So in the bubbling phase, this event bubbled up and was caught by the current target here, the thing with an ID of info. Cool. All right, let's try another one. I'm going to hide these, actually pull these out as we finish each one. So practicing again here, we're going to list for clicks on list items. Well, that's pretty broad. So we listen on all list items, and on click, we're going to call a function. That triggers an event. So console.log. Let's just log the target again, e.target. All right, take a peek. So here's a list item. Woohoo! Here's a list item. See, we're listening for all list items on the page, so it doesn't matter which one I click, I see some results. Neat. All right, and for one more practice, that's another way you can kind of fill in the structure first. So on what? On the button add, we're going to listen for an event and call a function in response. So what event? Oh, another click event. I'm going to pass in the e variable, and then we can console.log e.target. Keep wanting to do that, double parens. All right, so now this is the button.add. So now we're listening on these specific little guys over here. So if I click on somewhere else, I shouldn't see anything. But if I click on that button, and it works for both buttons, we're in business. All right, cool. So feel free to try out some of the other events that you see in the book if you'd like. In the next lesson, we'll be talking specifically about form events. So that's something to look forward to. Okay, so now let's actually respond to event and do something as a result. So we're not going to just log a message in each of these. We're going to do some other processing as a result. So we're going to listen for click events on info P. So info P. And we're going to listen for click events. And we're going to call a function that passes in an event as a result. All right, so when such events occurs, we're going to hide that element. So if we want to actually work with the element, remember it is the element that we clicked on is in e.target. So we would essentially want to go e.target.hide. But .hide is a jQuery method, which means that this needs to be converted to a jQuery object first. So we can do that directly, like this. But if we follow what we talked about in the slides, we might actually define this as, let's see, paragraph is assigned e.target. And then we can call paragraph.hide. All right, so let's see what happens when we click on a paragraph inside of info. We're deleting our paragraphs. Okay, mission accomplished. So why would we want to do this? I don't know. It's just an example. All right, let's do another one. In fact, let's replace this one. Getting more practice with these selectors. All right, listen for a click event on list group item. And when such event occurs, toggle its class active on or off. Ooh, this is fun. All right, so on. And we're going to listen on list group item for click. We listen for clicks a lot, don't we? All right, so when we hear that, we're going to e.target and add class of active. Yes, Abby? You may play now, yes. Okay. So in here we need e.target. So let's see how that works. So here's a list group item. We click on it. We make it active that is. Nice. Okay, but remember that it's possible that we could have heard a click on something inside. Let me just give an example. Let's say we go in here and we add an icon. Glyph icons are what we use in jQuery, or sorry, Bootstrap. Okay, so now there's a trash icon right here. So notice that if I click on this, I don't get that highlight like I did before. Why not? Well, watch what's happening. Keep in mind that what I'm actually clicking on is the trash can. So the trash can got the active class. That's not what I wanted. I wanted it up here on the list group item. So an example of where we need to be a little bit aware of when we're dealing with target versus current target. So e.target ended up adding the class of active to the trash can icon. Because the trash can icon was what we clicked on, that's the target. But we responded because it happened inside of this button, or inside of that list item. So we would want to use current target. We go over here and refresh. We've still got that trash can icon, and it still works on the others. But now when I click on the trash can icon, it ends up making the correct thing happen. Now, again, when would we click on a trash can icon? When we want to delete something, right? So, you know, whether the functionality is actually what we would really do in a normal situation is a different matter from this proving the point of how important it is to be aware of when you're dealing with current target versus target. So always a good step is to console log to confirm that you're targeting the right, or you know that you've actually heard the event, and then console log target and figure out whether target is what you wanted to listen for, or whether current target is the thing you want it to be working with. So a couple little variations there. Okay, last of all, let's listen for an event on the button.add. So button add, button dash add that is, and is of course going to be a click event. What else would we want to listen for? That's on the next module, lesson. Okay, we're listening for an event here. Okay, when that event occurs, ooh, we get to traverse to the closest panel. So var panel is going to be e.target.closest.panel. Sound familiar? Because we want to go up to that closest, the closest panel as a whole, because we've clicked to add an item, right? So it probably means we're going to go up here and then add a new list item inside of that somewhere. Ooh, fun. So we traversed up to the closest panel. Add a class of panel info to it and remove the class of panel primary. Okay, so we're not actually going through the full add an item functionality, but we're just proving the point of traversal at least. We have clicked on a button add. Now we're going to traverse up to the closest panel and add, we're going to panel.add class of panel info. And this is effectively going to change the color of the panel, you know, kind of header stuff. So these are Bootstrap classes. So if we click on this one, all right, we should have seen a change. Let me just refresh. Okay, so good chance to try to troubleshoot. What did we do? First of all, did I make a typo? Nope, everything seems correct there. So now let's look at the console. Am I getting any errors? Yes, I am. It says panel.addClass is not a function. So I'm going to test by logging panel to find out what I selected when I navigated up to the panel. Okay, so panel is an object, and it is a jQuery object. Maybe you saw it before me. 3 S's. Typos. Okay, so it changed the highlighting. You can see it's different from this one. We removed the primary class and put on the, which one was it? Info class. Makes it brighter. All right, good. So with a little troubleshooting and a little bit of play here, we've gotten it working. But let's talk about something more practical, all right? So now let's do a little example. What we're going to do is combine a couple skills. We're going to add some event listeners here so that when we're going to first sweep through and use jQuery to add some trash icons automatically. So I manually put a trash icon in here a moment ago, but we're just going to do that programmatically with JavaScript and add trash icons here. Then we're going to listen for clicks on those, and as a result, remove the item that was trashed. So first you're going to copy paste this code that does the automagic part I mentioned. So we're going to just copy and paste. If you want to enter it manually just to practice getting this stuff in your fingers, that's great. Quick note, we are making use of chaining, which is a topic that was mentioned in the first readings on jQuery. That's where we have defined button here, but we didn't put a semicolon. The semicolon is down here, and that's because we have just chained right onto this the fact that we're going to add 3 classes. So it's an I tag, it gets the class of glyph icon, which turns it on as an icon, glyph icon trash, which makes it specifically a trash can icon, and then pull right, which is another Bootstrap class that makes something essentially float right. And then we're appending this onto the current list item. So this is a loop, and we'll talk about loops in an upcoming lesson. So just save there and take a look. You should see the trash can icons appear, and if you look at the structure, you'll see that it's right inside of each list item at the very end, but inside the list item, that's the append method, we have this I tag with a class of glyph icon, and pull right. Okay. Thank you, JavaScript and jQuery, for making that little bit of work a lot easier than us copying and pasting. All right, so now we're going to, we've checked the results in the browser. We should see those, yes. So now let's listen for clicks on those glyph icon trash cans inside of group list items. So we're being kind of specific here, and if we wanted to talk about delegation, we could get even better at this. But of course, we're going to listen for a click and call an event handler as a result. So we're going to want to pass in our event object represented by the variable e. And we're going to go to list group items, and they're contained glyph icon trash. Now, why so specific? In this case, hey, maybe there's the possibility that we have these icons somewhere else. I want to make sure that I'm only listening for those inside of list group items. Okay, and we're going to log a message to just confirm. So log trying to trash an item. All right, so now when I refresh over here, I should not, we're not actually losing the item yet. We're just getting a console log that we're trying to. Okay, so now we're going to pull this out, and in step 3, we're going to create a new variable called button. We're going to assign to it the e.target. So since we're listening directly on the icon, it's safe to use target because that's the actual thing that we expect to have clicked. Okay, assigned the current target, to jQuery. So current events target and current target are the same in this case, so I'm just going to leave just target there. Now step number 4, traverse from the button to the closest list group item. So we're going to go button.closest. That allows us to move up the DOM tree or out the DOM tree upwards to a parent. The closest one that is the list group item class. And we're going to store that in a new variable called item. Okay, so we've got the button, we've got the button's parent list item, and now we're going to remove that item. So we're going to call item.remove. All right, so let's give it a test. So now when I click this thing, it should actually disappear. And it does. Ooh, irreversible. It's gone. Wait, I accidentally clicked the wrong one. How do I get it back? Well, thankfully we can refresh the page right now, so this isn't really a permanent change, but to the user it would feel awfully permanent. Boy, we better protect that. So next off, we're going to talk about how to kind of give the user the chance to, oh, oops, let me undo that action. Okay, so what we have is a modal window, and it is hidden by default. It's right here. You can see that it asks, are you sure you want to delete the item? And they have 2 buttons to cancel or to go ahead and delete it. So instead of removing, we're going to hide this. That's step 6 there. In place, let's see, right above it, we're going to select the modal confirm delete and assign it to a new variable called modal. So var modal is assigned jQuery selector for modal confirm delete. Okay, so that's this guy right here. It has an ID of modal confirm delete. So we've selected that and stored it in a variable. Directly below this, we're going to use that variable to call a bootstrap method for the modal that's here, and we're going to call the show. So as I explained in the instructions there, we're using the Bootstrap style sheet and jQuery library, or expansion of the jQuery library. So this is kind of taking care of some additional functionality for us. Given that we're listening for a click on that trash icon, we're now using jQuery and Bootstrap to actually turn on the modal that's associated with this. So let's go check the results in the browser. You click on a trash icon. Because we commented it out, the item is still there, but we get this nice little modal. Are you sure you want to delete? No, I don't. It was an accident. Versus here, let's delete the garlic. Okay, so we'll click delete, and we'll want something to happen. Okay, so now we need to make that actually happen when we click on the delete icon. Okay, so next step. Directly below this, we're going to add a new event listener for click on button confirm. So we're going to listen for clicks on button confirm. Okay, so note that in the modal, the delete it button has a class of button confirm. So when we click that, we're going to have an event handler that responds. All right, inside this event listener, we're going to call modal.modal hide. Okay, so that reverses the show command that we put on here. So the modal will show and wait until the user clicks on the button confirm. When they do, we will hide the modal. And of course, then we'll want to actually remove the item. So we're going to copy this line, paste it in here, clean up a little bit. Okay, and I think we're ready to go. Let's go test it. So now we should be able to undo the action. So nope, I was mistaken. I want to delete garlic. And now we delete it. The modal goes away and garlic is gone. Let's delete peppers. Let's delete onions. Oh, wait, nope, never mind, not onions. Cool. So behold the power of event listeners and handlers.